You may see him walking around campus or even taking the time to talk with students, faculty, and staff. He may even know you by name. President Barry Dunn tries to get to know each person he encounters at South Dakota State a little better. Today, on this episode of Between Classes, we get to know the 20th president of the university. Thanks for being here today, Barry.
Well, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
I am so excited to get to know you a little better because I have so many questions. First off, tell me about where you're from. You say you've lived all over.
Right. I was born near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My dad worked for Alcoa Aluminum. My early years were there, but then we moved a lot when I was a child. So we moved to Iowa and then Illinois. And then I had also spent quite a bit of time in Mission, South Dakota with my grandparents. And
so South Dakota is home for you, though.
Right. So since I moved so, frequently and during my childhood, and my grandparents were such a big part of my life, I claim South Dakota as home, but I really wasn't born here, which I've never said I was born anywhere else. But
so how did you decide that you were going to attend SDSU then?
I spent so much time with my grandparents on the cattle ranch that they had south of Mission on the Rosebud Indian Reservation that I wanted to take range management and animal science. And so this was the closest school. And so I love South Dakota, so I wanted to come here.
Natural fit.
The only school I applied to, I literally could have gone anywhere. My brothers and sisters went other places. I visited here with my older brother in the mid-1960s, and he didn't come here, and I fell in love with it. So I was probably 12 or 13, and just this was the only place I wanted to come.
And what's your older brother's name?
Greg.
So thanks, Greg.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a great guy.
Tell me about your time at SDSU, like your experience as a student here.
Actually, it was somewhat interrupted. I had my freshman year here, lived in Matthews Hall, 315, had a great roommate. But during that year, the draft for the Vietnam War was going on, so I was drafted, and my number was very low, and I was called to take my physical, and I was going to go into the draft. So during the summer of 72, I passed my physical and was waiting to get called up, so I sat out of school the fall of 72. Then came back in the spring because I didn't get drafted because they ended the war, and I resumed study. I lived in Pierce. I guess I lived in Matthews that year, that semester also. But I still graduated in 4 years. Had a great time.
That's awesome. So what did you graduate with then?
I changed majors. So I'm one of the, we talk about what leads to success. And here I dropped out for a semester and I changed my major and I did all those things and still graduated in 4 years. I graduated with a degree in biology. Once I got to college, I just loved it. I loved the classes. I loved learning. I had some professors that really, flipped the switch for me academically. And I worked hard. I studied hard and I just loved learning. So I had really good friends and did well academically, but also had a lot of fun.
You say you have good friends. A little birdie told me that your friends used to call you Harv.
Yeah. All across campus, I was known as Harvey or Harv. And so I can pick up and call my roommate, Larry Demers, and I got to say, Larry, it's Harv, and he knows who I am. So it still goes on.
So why'd they call you Harv?
Because of Harvey Dunn and Harvey Dunn Street. So that was why they called me Harv. And I'm not related to Harvey Dunn, but across campus, I was Harv.
Anything else that kind of sticks out to you about when you were a student?
Playing basketball in the barn, playing Frisbee across on the green. The campus wasn't quite as shifted to the east as much as it is now. So when I was a freshman, we were still in the old Union, which was Pugsley, which is hard to believe. But so we went to the jungle for Cokes and things like that. So it was a smaller campus, probably about half the number of students. So it was a very intimate time. I wasn't in student government. I was on a couple committees, but pretty much a bookworm, actually.
So you said you used to live in Pierson Hall at one point, and you said that's where you met your wife, Jane.
Right. Actually, my junior year, I lived in Pierson Hall, and I lived on first floor. Jane lived on fourth floor, and I couldn't figure out a way to meet her. So I intercepted her after class one day, and we had a system of paying for our meals called coupons, and they had little coupon books. Whatever you took out of the cafeteria, you had to pay for with a coupon book. And so My little brother, Roger, was coming to visit, and so I needed to buy extra coupon books because I was running low. And so I just walked up to her cold and asked if I could buy a coupon book. And she said no, turned and walked away. And then actually she called me. I went to my dorm room on first floor, and she went upstairs and she called me and said she would meet me downstairs and sell me a coupon book. So, and then I asked her out for ice cream, and that was it.
Did you get SDSU ice cream?
No, we went to A&W. It was really fun. So there used to be an A&W here. There isn't anymore. Unforgettable, though, Heidi.
After graduation, where did you go next?
But Jane's 2 classes behind me. So I stayed and got a master's degree in animal science, and Jane finished her nursing degree. And after graduation, we got married in 1977 and moved to North Dakota. I actually worked for North Dakota State University for 2 years. I know. But it was a really good experience. We were far away from each of our parents, which was, I think, a good thing. Snowed in most of the winter, had good jobs, and got to know each other as a young couple. So we worked there 2 years. I couldn't stand the winters anymore and moved south back to Mission.
So have you always kind of been in education then?
No, I was a research assistant and ran a cattle research farm for North Dakota State. So I was in agriculture and wrote research papers, but also fed cattle and did all the chores. But then I moved back to Mission and ran my family's cattle ranch for 17 years.
Wow. And then, from there, did you go to, the King Ranch Institute, or?
No, sadly, my parents both passed away at the same time and kind of triggered the sale of our ranch, which was very hard, but there's lots of family members involved. And so looking back with history, it was a good thing, and we did it well. We all got along and sold the ranch, and I needed to do something else. And so my little brother, Roger, stayed ranching in the area, but I came back and worked on a PhD and got a PhD in 2000 and got on the faculty here.
And while you were here, you served as dean of then the College of Agriculture and Biological Sciences.
Right. In between those two, though, I was hired into it's kind of a long life here now. I was hired into the Texas A&M system, and so we moved to Texas for 6.5 years and created what is now the King Ranch Institute for Ranch Management. It was a really wonderful experience getting out of South Dakota, working at another university. It was literally life-changing. It was really good for me to go somewhere else and outside of the Midwest. Texas is a fascinating place. It was a lot of fun. But I had the opportunity I was recruited to come home and be dean of the College of Agriculture and Biological Sciences, which I loved and couldn't turn it down. So I got to come home.
What do you miss about being dean?
The connection to students was a lot greater when I was dean. I missed teaching. I loved teaching. I taught 5 years here. I was teaching even before I got my PhD. So I loved the classroom, and I taught in Texas. And teaching was the most rewarding experience of my life. And so I miss that.
You don't think we could work something out where you could teach one class?
I actually called Dean Becky Bott and asked about creating a president's book club, just doing something so I could get more connected. So I didn't do it this year, but maybe I will in the future, have a president's book club and have a 1 credit course.
Anything certain you like to read?
I have a rotation. I read a biography, and then I'll switch to a novel. And then I read some contemporary book on leadership or some, popular book on our times, something by Jared Diamond. So anyway, I rotate. I try to keep it. But I love biographies the best. Going
from dean to president, what kind of struck you that made you want to become president?
Former president and President Emeritus Shequin asked me to attend a course in probably 2014 on how to be a president. And I hadn't thought about it. I loved my job, but I took the course. I went to Washington, D.C. for a couple weeks in the summer. It was a great experience. It's put on by an American Association of State Colleges and Universities, and it's to prep people that might be interested in the presidency. So I hadn't really thought about it before that at all, but I appreciated President Shequin's encouragement. And so had a great time in the course, learned a lot about it. And then a couple years later, when he decided to retire, I was encouraged by friends to apply. Wasn't sure that I'd be competitive, but ended up winning the race. So it's pretty exciting.
What has been kind of your favorite or most fulfilling part so far?
It sounds kind of corny, but graduation day is really exciting. I get my hand crushed by 2,200 students, but it is really an amazing experience to watch thousands of students come across that stage, graduate with Frost Arena just packed. We have 3 graduation ceremonies, and the first 2 are just packed, and the third one's very full too. So that's an indescribable a moment of celebration and pride and accomplishment. I get to share it with all those young people, and it's really fun.
That is really fun. So outside of work, what is your life kind of like outside of SDSU?
There isn't much outside of SDSU. Jane and I are pretty active members in First Lutheran Church here in Brookings, and so I'm a lay reader every month. And we did a memorial service for the little girl that died this summer, and Jane and I were pretty much the primary organizers of that thing. So I'm pretty religious, and so that's a big part of my life. And then I read a lot, and Jane and I still have our farm north of Brookings, and so I go out to the farm, mow the lawn. Jane plants flowers. We just really enjoy it a lot.
What would you say are kind of your passions outside of work?
I made a commitment about 20 years ago to read a book a month. I've always loved reading when I was a little boy. When I was in high school, I read all the time, all through college. When we had a young family, I got to read children books again. So after the boys were grown, I had to recommit myself to reading, and I just absolutely love it.
So you have 2 boys?
2 grown sons, you're right.
And are they nearby?
Yeah, they're both here in Brookings. Our son Michael works for, and his wife both work for the Animal Disease Research and Diagnostic Lab. And our son Tom lives in Brookings, but he works for Lake Area Tech. He's the Brookings business representative for Lake Area Tech. So we get to see each other quite a bit. We try to have a family supper every Sunday night. Doesn't always work out, but we're pretty intentional about getting together once a week.
That's nice.
Yeah, football interrupts it. Sometimes now it's football and we don't do Sunday nights, but it's very nice.
So how we like to end each one of these podcasts, we like to ask you 2 questions. The first one being, what is your favorite thing about SDSU?
I think it's this eclectic group of people that I have met and come to love and appreciate over now almost 50 years. It's just an amazing group of people that I've come to love and be friends with, and challenged me, played basketball with, and played Frisbee with, all the way to wrote scientific papers with. It just, if I could list them all, it would go on, Heidi, but it's really an incredible experience.
And then what is your favorite part about Brookings?
Especially in the job I had at Texas A&M, but now even as president, I get to travel a lot and see a lot of communities, a lot of university communities, and I can tell you there's nothing like Brookings. It is such a nice place, small or large. It is the nicest college town I've ever been in. The tagline used to be, it's something special about Brookings, and there's just some magic about it, and I loved it when I was a student, and I love it even more now.
We know you're not just saying that because you keep coming back.
Yeah, I kept coming back, absolutely.
Thank you so much, President Barry Dunn, for sharing with us a little bit more about yourself. This is Between Classes. Thanks for listening.